Welcome back for our final session of the Niyamas. And after this, we have two more to complete our sutra study, plus a little bit of a closure. So you're nearly there. You're definitely over halfway. So I'm going to invite you to take a moment for us to invoke the Guru. So if that's lowering your gaze or closing your eyes completely. Doing what you need to do to settle into yourself to the best of your ability right now. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. And then lifting your gaze, opening your eyes completely. So today we turn to Sutra 244, which speaks of this practice of svādhyāya. And svādhyāya, from its Sanskrit roots, means to recollect, remember, contemplate, meditate on the self. And the self, that's what I call the big S self, which I'll explain shortly. So this is the practice of the effort of knowing self, that self that's at the very innermost core of our being. Just by taking this course, you are enacting this niyama, the study of self, through the reflections and the questions, and just considering your life in relationship to these texts. So svādhyāya is that looking within, that observing, that inquiring of self, all the things that we're asking you to consider and do in this course. And then by considering this ultimate question of being alive, who am I, what is this kind of situation, the sutras indicate the study of the self is what leads us in communion with the divine, or whatever it is that you see as that most innermost energy or outermost energy. So when one moves through one's day with this awareness and remembering of self, they are enacting the practice of svādhyāya. So I want to share a diagram that I've created. I'm going to make it big here. So as you can see on the left in that upper rectangle, there is the small s self. And on the far right in that oval kind of shape is a capital S self. Now this is just my depiction of my research and self-study and practice of 35 years. But it's also of my work as a scholar in my PhD program. And how I've come to bring some of my PhD work into this diagram is through those top three arrows that you see. So you see ego, you see emotional cognition, and you see embodiment. And below, each of those are described. So my theory is that in the ego kind of category, when we're more engaged with ego and a little bit less aware of self, we move towards that smaller self. But when the ego is less engaged and it's more aware of this other great awareness, this capital S self, which some might call Atman, we then are moving in that direction. When it comes to emotional cognition, the more we lean toward apathy or disconnection, we move towards the small S self, which is kind of the everyday self that is likely to be less aware and less engaged in a meaningful way. Or we're more empathetic in our connection and we move more towards the capital S self. And then finally, with embodiment, when we become, let's say, overly obsessed or so forth on, exactly what we're wearing or how we look or the makeup we wear or things that are more superficial, more maybe culturally driven. I'm not saying that some of that isn't something we do just to make ourselves happy, but if, knowing the intention behind why we are making ourselves look the way we are, that could lead to a little bit less embodiment and a more into a place of trying to please others, whereas we can come into more presence when what we do with our body and the way we make our body look is based on a way that's really truly caring for ourselves and of ourselves. So that's just that diagram in just a little nutshell. And Swami Kripala, founder of Kripala Yoga, said the highest spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. So again, going to the left, it tends to be a place where we're more in judgment, whereas to the right, we're more curious and in that place of wonderment and observation. Another person who I've quoted before, Stephen Cope, says, svādhyāya is a skillful and systematic investigation of how things are. When you practice self-observation, you begin to discover, lost track there. When you practice self-observation, you begin to uncover and address the unconscious patterns governing your life. So just to consider, actually I don't want to quite go there yet, sorry. To consider for yourself, when you are in self-reflection, when you are in self-observation, what is it that you do? That's something you could make a few quick notes about. I concur with these two statements as someone who's been a life coach for almost 2 decades now. I have been a witness to this very process of when stability is gained in that kind of capital S, bigger picture self, one can more wholeheartedly and authentically be in connection and extend themselves towards others. And many of the yamas and niyamas can then be lived out, from ahimsa to satya, asteya to santosha. So when we're in that capital S self-experience, where we live a little bit less in ego, we're more cognitively aware of our emotions, and when we are embodied in such a way that is truest to us. So if you find yourself losing perspective, this is when you turn to the sacred texts such as this, such as the sutras, the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, whatever it is, that seminal writing that you relate to the most. And then let that help you be a tool of self-study, a tool of regrounding into self. So, and if you read these in the service of svādhyāya, you are likely to find a resonance in these texts and an aspect that assists you in beginning to truly understand that all beings have an experience similar to yourself. That's part of this whole process, is realizing we're really just not that different, yeah? And so study assists us in understanding the universality of life and the experience of others, and thereby increases compassion for oneself and others. So I hope that not only does this make sense in your mind, but you can feel the truth of this in other parts of your being. Maybe just take a moment and consider the places that you feel the truth of this for you, and the places where you're not as sure. So as your notion of what yoga is to you and your journey in svādhyāya, I'm going to ask you to consider this quote by yet another teacher, T.S. Little. I believe he's in New Mexico. He says, if a yoga practice is devoid of inquiry into the nature of mind or devoid of self-reflection, is it really yoga? For me, this was a very powerful quote, having watched this evolution of yoga in the modern Western world and having done quite a bit of study of it in the Eastern world. I would answer this, for me, no. If I didn't have a meditative practice, if I didn't do self-study, I would not feel as if I was enacting what I know yoga to be. So that's just something for you to consider as you continue on your journey to understand and embrace and formulate within you what the practice of yoga, what the practices are that go towards the attainment of yoga are for you. So let's move on to the next sutra that has to do with Iśvara praṇidhāna. So we've spoken about Iśvara a couple times before. As you may recall, I had encouraged you and asked you to consider for yourself what this could represent, what it is that you think is or feel is that all-pervading consciousness, which is what Iśvara means. And then the praṇidhāna represents the capacity and ability to surrender. So it's what is it that you see as all-pervading, that you put your faith into, okay? So when combined, these may be translated as trustful surrender to God, or whatever the word is you put in there, entity you put in there, or what you use as a label for all-pervading consciousness, whatever that is to you. And as I had said, reminder back in that second session, when you were asked first about the identity of an aspect of soulfulness that resonates with you, this is what I'm speaking to. So it's a word that depicts an energy or an entity that denotes a form of sacredness for you. So you can figure that out, and you can think of that as you explore this sutra and the concept of Iśvara praṇidhāna. So some may believe self-surrender is a process, and that it's a leading to mindless submitting to another's will. And this niyama is not meant to be an act of giving yourself or giving ourselves to a higher purpose of our own determination. It isn't that. What the sutra asks us, 245, says that liberation comes only from a love of communion with and surrender to that which is eternal to you. So I'm going to say that again. So the sutra says that liberation comes only from a love of communion with and surrender to that which is eternal for you. So to embrace Iśvara praṇidhāna, it helps to understand what God is for you. And you don't have to believe in an anthropomorphic representation of God to accept that there is a divine design, a benevolent essence in the universe. Says Joan Harrigan, who's a practicing psychologist and yoga person. She has an article in Yoga Journal page that you can, or yogajournal.com, that you can go to. It's about Yoga 101, the philosophy of path and happiness. She also says it's about offering oneself to the divine matrix. It's letting our own holy essence guide our actions and catching the sacred power of life. And finally, according to Patanjali, this is the highest power there is for us to ask. And it is translated that this is the promise of the sutras. This, when we surrender, or when we unite or yoke with this eternal essence, presence, we attain that state of yoga. So I'm going to invite you, when you're ready, as you're making your notes and so forth, to finish up. Just last things, pause if you need to. And then I'm going to ask you to put your pens and papers aside. And you can even pause the video and move into a more comfortable seat. And we're going to do a little meditative practice together. Which, as you're learning, is just one of the avenues toward that ability to connect with that all-pervading energy. And then when you're ready, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, lower your gaze, and then begin to consciously follow your breath. Bringing a rhythm to the breath where you inhale, say 3 to 4 seconds, and exhale the same. Whatever number, whatever amount is right for you. And at first, just allow the mind to wander. If it starts to jump around, as it's likely to do, just see if you can be the observer of where it's going, where it's jumping to. Noticing the things that entice it. Its default places to go. Maybe be curious about those default places for just a moment. And now try to take that role of the observer to another level as you watch your thoughts. Imagine yourself standing back, maybe putting your hand to your chin, rubbing it as if to say, isn't it interesting how my mind is thinking of all of these things at this time? So you're just engaging a deep curiosity. Again, just letting the thoughts bounce about. And with deep curiosity, noticing where they take you, where they want to take you, which ones keep recurring. Continuing to engage that the state of curiosity. Continuing to observe as if watching a movie. The thoughts create a movie that you're not in. You're in the theater seat, watching the movie on the screen. And even though you have an awareness that these are your thoughts, they're part of you, you're not judging yourself. Eventually, the mind is bound to run out of things. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. But do what you can still for several more minutes here to just be aware, to observe yourself and the inner workings of your mind. Gently and slowly. Feeling yourself with your hands. Taking time to raise your gaze or open your eyes. So this practice I just shared with you is a simple way to begin to self-study, enact svādhyāya. It is a simple way to begin to create connection with Iśvara praṇidhāna. It is a way to begin to meditate. It's how I began to meditate almost 35 years ago. I would just sit and watch my mind, and it's how I came to understand myself. It's how I came to understand the obstacles I put in front of myself, the places where I honored myself, the places where I didn't. So I would just use it as a time of deep, deep curiosity to know me and the workings of my mind and my being. So this is a practice I hope that will be something that serves you, and maybe through time it becomes something that deepens your understanding of your connection to whatever it is you see as that essence of the universe. So we'll close our practice today, or our session as well, with this final mantra. So taking whatever position you need to with eyes, seat, hands. We'll take 3 inhales, and on the 3rd exhale, we'll chant it together. So drawing the breath in. Second time. And one last time. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Well, thanks everybody for coming. We have 2 sessions left, so I'll see you in the next one.